Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it casually, like she was talking about the weather. We were standing in the kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, receipts from Costco still on the counter, the smell of bulk coffee and rotisserie chicken hanging in the air. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She was scrolling her phone, thumb moving with practiced ease, already somewhere else. She said intimacy felt like pressure lately, that she needed space, that it was just a phase. She said we should pause it for a while. No drama, no tears, just logistics. I nodded. I remember the exact second my chest went quiet. Not heavy, not broken, quiet, like someone had muted a channel I didn't realize was always playing. I told her that was perfect, that phases deserve silence. She laughed softly, the way people laugh when they think they've won something small. Then she walked past me, brushing my shoulder like it meant nothing, and turned on Netflix like this was just another adjustment we'd work around. That night, we sat on opposite ends of the couch. The screen kept talking, so we didn't have to. I noticed how natural it felt for her not to reach for me. How practiced. Like this pause had already been rehearsed somewhere I wasn't invited. I'm the owner of a logistics company. Small, regional, tight margins. I built it by noticing patterns before other people did. Delays, bottlenecks, human behavior. My wife, Emily, was our HR director. Officially, she handled people. Unofficially, she managed influence. And she was good at it. Everyone liked her, trusted her, especially Mark. Mark was my operations manager, my right hand, the guy who knew the schedules, the passwords, the weak points in our system, the guy who'd been in my house more times than I could count. Barbecues, game nights, work emergencies that turned into late dinners. That evening, Emily sat there texting, her face lit by her screen, smiling at something she wasn't sharing. When I asked how her day was, she said fine, without looking up. I didn't push. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate intimacy like it was a contract renewal. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and stared at our shared photos. Trips, smiles, evidence of something that had already started disappearing. By midnight, the house felt larger. Not emptier. Larger. Like a space that had been cleared for something else to move in. That was the night I realized the pause wasn't about sex. It was about access. And I had just agreed to lose mine. The first crack didn't come from her. It never does. It came from work, wrapped in something that sounded harmless. A scheduling issue. A delay that shouldn't have happened. I was in my office early, earlier than usual, the building still quiet. I'd stopped bringing my phone to bed, stopped checking it first thing in the morning. Silence had become efficient. Mark walked in with his usual confidence, coffee in hand, already talking before he sat down. He'd picked it up from Duncan, same order he always had. He knew my habits. That used to feel like loyalty. He mentioned that Emily had adjusted a few internal roles. Temporary changes, he said. Morale-related. HR stuff. I nodded, but something in the way he avoided my eyes registered. I asked him who suggested the changes. He paused, just a fraction too long, then said it was a joint decision. That was the moment I felt it. Not suspicion. Alignment. Pieces that had already found each other without me. I didn't confront him. I thanked him and told him to keep things moving. After he left, I pulled up access logs. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Just patterns. Shared calendar blocks that didn't involve me. Meetings that didn't need both of them. Conversations that were starting to exist in a parallel lane. At home that night, Emily moved through the house like a guest who knew where everything was. Polite, efficient, distant. She reheated leftovers, ate standing up, and disappeared into the bedroom with her phone. The pause had settled in fast, like it had been waiting. Later, I passed the living room and saw Netflix still playing from earlier, some show neither of us was watching. She'd left it on, volume low, like noise was a substitute for presence. I stood there longer than I should have, watching the screen talk to no one. The next day, a junior dispatcher asked me if Mark was officially taking on more authority. He said people were confused about who decisions were coming from lately. He said Emily had told them things were evolving. Evolving. That word stuck. At lunch, I sat in my car instead of going inside. I watched employees come and go, laughing, checking their phones, moving freely in a system I thought I controlled. I realized something uncomfortable then. Intimacy hadn't paused. It had relocated. That night, Emily brushed past me again in the hallway. No eye contact. No tension. Just absence. I noticed how easy it was for her not to need me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't accuse. I started pulling reports instead. Not to catch her. To understand the shape of what I was being removed from. Evidence doesn't arrive like a confession. It accumulates. Quietly. Respectfully. Like it knows not to rush you. I didn't go looking for proof right away. That's what people expect you to do when you're emotional. I waited until the pause settled into routine. Until silence stopped feeling sharp and started feeling normal. That's when patterns show themselves. I noticed Emily stopped syncing her calendar to mine. Not dramatically, just a few missing blocks here and there. Lunch meetings that ran long. Off-site check-ins that didn't need her presence. HR emergencies that somehow aligned with Mark's operational reviews. At home, she stopped asking where I was going. I stopped offering explanations. We moved through the house on separate tracks, careful not to collide. At night, she'd sit on the edge of the bed, scrolling Amazon like it was a reflex, ordering things we didn't need for a life we weren't living anymore. One evening, I opened our shared cloud storage. Nothing invasive. Nothing hacked. Just files I still had access to because no one thought to lock the door yet. Expense reports. Travel reimbursements. A pattern of mileage claims that overlapped too neatly. His routes. Her conferences. Cities that made sense separately, but not together. I didn't screenshot anything. I didn't forward files to myself. I didn't need souvenirs. This wasn't about catching them in the act. It was about understanding how long I'd been unnecessary. At work, I watched them interact from a distance. Professional. Efficient. Familiar. He anticipated her needs before she spoke. She deferred to him without hesitation. It wasn't flirtation. It was alignment. That's what hurt. The final confirmation came from something small. A vendor invoice that listed Mark as the primary contact for a decision that required my approval. Emily's digital signature was already there. I closed the document and leaned back in my chair. No anger. No spike in heart rate. Just clarity. That night, the house was quiet again. Netflix played in the background, untouched. Emily went to bed early, phone in hand, door not fully closed. I sat at the kitchen table long after the screen went dark. This was the moment most people explode. Demand answers. Restore balance through noise. I didn't. I deleted our shared photo album. Left the rest untouched. Then I logged out of the family group chat. No announcement. No explanation. Just absence. In the morning, she noticed. I could tell by the way she hovered in the doorway, like she'd felt a shift in air pressure. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But something had changed. The pause was no longer hers. It was mutual now, and I had started moving. I didn't disappear all at once. That would have been noticeable. Emotional. Traceable. I stayed physically present long enough for her to believe the silence was temporary, something she could reverse when it suited her. Then I started turning things off. It began with my phone. I went to Best Buy on a Tuesday afternoon, bought a new one, paid cash, and set it up without restoring anything. No shared photos. No old messages. No family threads. I memorized the few numbers I still needed and left the rest behind like expired passwords. At home, I stopped reacting. When she spoke, I listened. When she touched my arm in passing, I didn't pull away. I also didn't lean in. Neutral became my default setting. Emily noticed the change, but misread it. She thought I was adjusting, processing, waiting for her phase to end. That weekend, she suggested we do our usual Costco run. She said it lightly, like an olive branch. I told her I already went, which was true. I just went alone. Different time, different rhythm. The house grew quieter after that. Not tense. Controlled. Netflix stopped playing as background noise because I stopped turning it on. Silence replaced it, clean and uninterrupted. At work, I delegated more. Mark took it as trust. Emily took it as relief. They didn't see it for what it was. Detachment. On Friday, I left early. No announcement. No excuse. I drove until the city thinned out and parked. Sat there longer than I expected. The Camry idled softly, reliable as ever, like it didn't need reassurance to keep running. That night, Emily texted asking where I was. I saw the notification on my new phone and didn't open it. Not out of spite. Out of consistency. Pauses work best when you don't break them. By Sunday morning, she was pacing. I could hear it in her steps. She asked if something was wrong. I told her everything was fine. That answer unsettled her more than anger ever could. On Monday, I removed my name from the shared streaming account. Not dramatically, just quietly unavailable. I archived old conversations. Left the house before she woke up. I didn't block her. I didn't vanish. I just stopped being reachable in the ways that mattered. By the end of the week, she was checking her phone more than usual, watching me instead of scrolling, waiting for cues that never came. The pause had ended, but not the way she expected. I was still there, just no longer accessible. What people misunderstand about leverage is that it doesn't require confrontation. It requires timing and patience. Mark grew comfortable fast. He always had. Comfort makes people careless. When someone believes they're untouchable, they stop checking their footing. I watched him closely, but not obviously. I stopped calling him into my office. Let him run operations without interruption. Let him believe the distance meant trust. Emily seemed lighter too, more relaxed at work, like pressure had lifted from her shoulders now that I wasn't in the middle of their orbit. One morning, I arrived early and saw Mark's car already there. That was new. He used to show up late, grab Duncan on the way, ease into the day. Now he was punctual, motivated, protective of his access. I pulled compliance reports, vendor agreements, insurance filings. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just shortcuts, decisions made without full authorization. Things I'd allowed before because they saved time. Things that only became dangerous when someone else started believing the company was already theirs. I didn't flag anything internally. I didn't tighten controls. I adjusted visibility. Subtly, I made sure certain documents landed on the desks of people who asked better questions than I did. Auditors, consultants, third parties with no emotional investment. At home, Emily tried to reconnect in small ways, asking if I wanted coffee, mentioning a show on Netflix she thought I'd like. I responded politely, briefly, then returned to silence. The more neutral I became, the more she filled the space with effort. By midweek, Mark started looking tired, distracted. His confidence cracked at the edges. He stayed later, made more calls, smiled less. Emily noticed. I could see it in the way she watched him from across the floor, concern replacing ease. On Thursday, a vendor emailed me directly, asked for clarification on a process Mark had authorized. Nothing accusatory, just uncertainty. I replied calmly and looped in legal. That was enough. I didn't need to expose anything. Systems correct themselves when pressure is applied in the right place. By Friday, Mark's authority felt questioned, not revoked. Questioned. That distinction matters. It creates instability without blame. Emily came home quiet that night. Not distant. Unsettled. She asked if work was okay. I said it was busy. Later, lying in bed, she turned toward me for the first time in weeks. Her hand hovered, unsure. I didn't move. That's when she realized something important had shifted. The pause she'd asked for had consequences, and they were no longer confined to the bedroom. The shift became visible to other people before it became real to her. That's how social gravity works. You don't feel it until you notice everyone else stepping back. It started with small things at work. Conversations stopping when Emily walked into a room. Not abruptly, just softly redirected. Smiles that didn't linger. Questions that used to come to her now going somewhere else first. She noticed, but misattributed it to stress. Mark felt it too. His meetings shortened. His emails got slower responses. Authority that once moved effortlessly now met quiet resistance. No one accused him of anything. That was the worst part. There was nothing to defend against. One afternoon, I walked past the break area and overheard a conversation fall silent. Someone said something about clarity, about accountability, about how things had shifted lately. No names, no blame, just implication. Emily came home that evening irritated. She didn't know where to place it yet. She tried to talk about her day, about how people felt distant, how the culture seemed off. I listened without interruption, nodded where it made sense, said nothing that could be quoted back to me. Later that night, she went quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. The kind that scans the room for support and finds none. Saturday morning, I left early and went to IHOP alone. I sat in a corner booth, ordered breakfast, and watched families come and go. The place was loud in a way that didn't demand anything from me. When I got home, Emily was standing in the kitchen, phone in hand, staring at nothing. She asked if I'd noticed people acting strange lately. At work. With friends. She said it felt like she was being edged out of conversations she used to lead. I said things change. That answer didn't help her. It wasn't supposed to. By Sunday, she suggested we go to Costco together, like before. She framed it as routine. Familiarity. I told her I had plans. She didn't ask what they were. That evening, Netflix stayed off. No background noise to soften the space between us. She sat closer than usual, trying to re-anchor herself. I stayed still. At work the following week, someone said to her, gently, that maybe she'd overestimated how much control she had. They said it without cruelty, almost kindly. That was the moment the room shifted. Emily wasn't isolated because she'd been exposed. She was isolated because people no longer aligned themselves with her. An alignment, once lost, is hard to reclaim. She came home that night quieter than ever. For the first time, she wasn't sure who was on her side. And she realized I hadn't been for a while. Isolation doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly, like dust on furniture no one uses anymore. Emily started staying home more. Not because she wanted to, but because there was nowhere she felt solid. Work had become unpredictable. Conversations felt measured. People listened, but they no longer leaned in. Influence doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. Mark stopped coming by the house. No more casual drop-ins. No late-night calls disguised as work emergencies. Whatever connection they'd been managing inside the system was now under pressure, and pressure changes behavior. I didn't ask about him. She didn't volunteer anything. At home, she tried to restore routines. Suggested watching something together. Turned Netflix on without asking, like muscle memory. I sat there, present but absent, eyes on the screen, attention somewhere else. She kept glancing at me, trying to catch a reaction she could build on. There wasn't one. She started talking more. Filling space. Recounting her day in detail, mentioning names, explaining dynamics I already understood. She needed an anchor. I let her talk. Silence works best when it isn't hostile. One morning, she left early for work and came back before noon. She said she wasn't feeling well. She didn't look sick. She looked displaced, like someone who had lost their place in line and didn't know how to step back in. That afternoon, I went for a drive. No destination, just movement. When I got back, she was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee untouched. She asked if I thought people still respected her. I told her respect isn't something you can ask for. She nodded, like that answer hurt more than she expected. Later, I heard her on the phone in the bedroom. Voice low, careful, not emotional, strategic. She was trying to secure something. Support, reassurance. It didn't last long. That night, she moved closer to me in bed. Not confidently, tentatively, like someone reaching for a light switch in the dark. Her hand rested near mine, not touching. I didn't move. The distance between us wasn't physical anymore. It was structural. The next morning, I stopped for breakfast at IHOP on my way to work. Same booth as before. Same order. Familiar noise, zero expectations. When I got home that evening, she asked where I'd been. I said I ate out. She asked why I hadn't invited her. I told her I didn't think she'd want to go. That landed harder than anything I could have said. Because it was true. By then, she wasn't losing me. She had already lost the version of herself that mattered to me. And she was only just starting to feel it. The confrontation didn't happen the way she expected. There was no explosion. No late-night confession. No raised voices that could be replayed later to make sense of things. It happened in daylight, quietly, when denial had finally run out of places to hide. She waited until Sunday evening. The house was still. No Netflix. No background noise to soften what she was about to risk. She sat across from me at the table like it was a meeting she hadn't prepared for, but couldn't postpone anymore. She asked when I stopped loving her. Not accusing. Not dramatic. Just confused. Like she genuinely couldn't find the moment things had slipped out of her control. I took my time answering. Not because I needed it. Because she did. I told her I hadn't stopped loving her. I told her I stopped participating. That distinction hit harder than rejection. I could see it in the way her posture shifted, like she'd been bracing for the wrong impact. She said she felt shut out. That I'd gone cold. That it felt like I was punishing her for needing space. I didn't correct her. I didn't explain intent. Explanations are negotiations, and I wasn't negotiating anymore. She leaned forward, searching my face for something familiar. Anger, hurt, desire, anything she could still influence. There was nothing there she could use. She mentioned work. The pressure, the confusion, how things felt unstable lately. She said she needed me on her side. That was the moment the truth finally surfaced. I told her I was on my own side now. Not aggressively, not proudly, just factually, like stating the weather. She asked if there was someone else. The question came out smaller than she meant it to. I said no. That answer didn't comfort her. It made things worse, because it meant she wasn't being replaced. She was being removed. She reached for my hand then, actually touched it this time. Her fingers wrapped around mine like muscle memory fighting reality. I didn't pull away. I also didn't respond. That silence did what words couldn't. It showed her exactly where she stood. She whispered that she didn't know how we got here. I told her we didn't get here suddenly. We arrived gradually, through pauses, through reallocations, through choices that seemed harmless until they weren't. She asked what I wanted. I stood up. I told her I wanted consistency and distance until respect returned on its own. Then I walked out of the room, not because the conversation was over, but because I was. And for the first time, she understood that this wasn't a phase she could wait out. It was an exit she couldn't block. Collapse doesn't look like chaos at first. It looks like confusion, like someone standing in a familiar room, suddenly unsure what anything is for. Emily unraveled quietly. No scenes, no messages she could later regret, just a steady loss of footing. At work, her influence continued to thin. Projects moved forward without her input. Decisions were made before she arrived. Mark avoided her entirely now. Whatever protection their closeness once offered had evaporated under scrutiny. He wasn't fired. He didn't need to be. His authority shrank until it was procedural, not strategic. He stopped being the man with answers and became someone waiting for instructions that never came. That kind of fall is slow, but visible. At home, Emily started rearranging things. Cabinets, closets. She deleted apps, reinstalled them, then left her phone face down like it might betray her. She tried to fill the silence with activity, but the house resisted. It stayed still, unimpressed. One evening, she asked if I remembered how close we used to be. I told her I remembered consistency. That answer didn't land the way she hoped. She began revisiting the past in fragments. Little moments she'd dismissed before. Me handling problems without complaint. Me showing up when things got hard. Me being steady while she explored distance. Those memories surfaced now not as comfort, but as accusation. The realization came in waves. Not all at once. Each one hurt more than the last. She stopped sleeping. Started watching me when she thought I wouldn't notice. Like she was studying a stranger who used to feel familiar. I had already moved on internally. My days were structured, clean. I had breakfast at IHOP most mornings, alone, the noise grounding in a way the house never was. I didn't rush home anymore. There was nothing waiting that required me. One afternoon, I came back to find her sitting on the floor of the bedroom, surrounded by old photos she'd printed years ago. Proof of something she hadn't protected. She didn't cry. She just looked tired. She asked if it was too late. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one. Because answers would have softened the truth. That night, she reached for me again. Not with confidence. With urgency. Like someone realizing the ground is giving way. I stood up and went to the other room. The next morning, she woke up alone in a quiet house and understood something final. This wasn't punishment. This was consequence. And it wasn't mine to reverse. The end didn't arrive with a decision. It arrived with clarity. By the time she finally understood what she'd lost, there was nothing left for me to explain. Explanations belonged to people still hoping to negotiate. I wasn't. That morning felt ordinary. That's what made it definitive. No tension in the air. No heaviness. Just routine stripped down to its essentials. I woke up before her, showered, dressed, and moved through the house without trying to be quiet. There was no reason to sneak anymore. She stood in the doorway watching me, eyes tired, face open in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not defensive, not strategic, just honest. Too late honesty still looks like honesty, but it doesn't carry the same weight. She asked if I was leaving. I said I was already gone. This was just the logistics catching up. She followed me into the kitchen. The counter was clear. No shared lists. No plans. No illusion of togetherness. She asked if there was anything she could do now. Anything at all. I told her pauses don't come with guarantees. That was the closest thing to mercy I offered. I picked up my keys and headed out. She didn't block the door. She didn't cry. She just stood there, absorbing the stillness like it was finally speaking her language. I stopped at IHOP on the way out of town. Same booth. Same calm noise. I ate slowly, not because I was hungry, but because there was no rush anymore. When I finished, I paid and left without looking back. By the time she returned from Costco later that afternoon, the driveway was empty. Not dramatically, just empty. No note. No explanation. Just space where something reliable used to be. She called once. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Out of consistency. Weeks later, I heard she asked people when I'd stopped loving her. They didn't have an answer. Neither did she. The truth was simpler than she expected. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And once I muted the relationship, the silence did the rest. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.